Hello there and welcome back. We've only got 2 chapters left. So chapter 12 ended with Winky and Tip deciding that they're going to go to the Littles' house by hopping on a garbage truck and riding there so that they can hopefully get help from Major Nick so that they can get to Smoke Mountain and hopefully find their parents. Let's see what happens in chapter 13. We've got a new guest reader today. Our guest reader today is someone who always orders 2 coffees from our Cafe Tuesday every single Tuesday. Sometimes he's not in his office, so we usually leave the 2 cups of coffee in there for him. He is also the administrator who evaluates me and does observations of me in our classroom. And he's a football coach. Do you know who it is? I'm sure you do. Let's read chapter 13 and see what happens next. Early Friday morning, the children sneaked out of Trash City, and with the help of Mus, they made it to the truck parking lot without trouble. Tip and Winky said goodbye to their friends and got aboard garbage truck number 3. They hid under the seat of the cab. It was just where the Littles had hidden themselves when they had come to Trash City. At 5:30, a man came aboard and drove the truck off to begin his rounds of picking up trash. He arrived at the big family's house around noon. Winky and Tip jumped out of the truck's cab while the driver was picking up the big's trash. They hid behind a telephone pole so he wouldn't see them. When he drove away, the 2 children ran across the yard to the house. They searched for and found the secret entrance that they had learned about during their Christmas visit. The 2 children got aboard the tin can elevator. They rode from the cellar to the Littles' apartment in the walls of the house. Winnie knocked on the kitchen door. Tom Little opened the door. "Hello, Tom," said Winky. "We came to talk to Major Nick about something very important." The Littles were about to have lunch. Some of them were already in the kitchen. "Who is it, Tom?" Mr. Little called. "It's the McDust twins," said Tom. So there's Winky and Tip with Tom answering the door. All right, Mr. Martin, take it away.
By this time, Lucy Little was standing alongside her brother. "It is," she said, opening the door wide for everyone to see. Mr. Little rushed to greet the twins. "Welcome, Winky and Tip," he said as he put his arms around the 2 children and hugged them. He looked into the wall passageway. "Surely you're not alone, are you?" he said. "Yes, sir, we are," said Winky. At that point, Major Little came running into the kitchen. "Winky, Tip," he shouted, "what are you doing here? Did I hear you say you came alone?" "We have to talk to you, Major Nick," said Winky. "It's about our parents." "We know where they are," said Tip, "and no one in Trash City will help us find them." Major Little took Winky and Tip into the living room. He closed the door while the rest of the Littles ate lunch. The Major wanted to be alone with the children and to hear their story.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martin, for joining us on our second to last chapter. When they were finished, Major Nick shook his head slowly. "I can't help you," he said. "I'm sorry." Tears welled up in Winky's eyes. "Why not, Major Nick?" she asked. "You have to help us," said Tip. "You're our best friend." "I can't help you because I just don't think it's possible to find out who and where your parents are from. Winky's dreams and Tip's imagination," said the Major. "I know you 2 kids mean well, and I wish I could help you. I really do, but I can't." Tip hung his head. "If you were a kid like us, you'd believe," he said. But no matter what Winky and Tip said, Major Nick wouldn't change his mind. He also told them they had been wrong to run away to see him. He told them that Cousin Dinky and his wife Della would fly by that afternoon with the mail. Cousin Dinky, he said, would fly them back to Trash City right away. He knew Mr. Penny and Mayor Clutter would be terribly worried about them. Winky and Tip had lunch at the Littles. Everyone tried to be nice to them while they waited for Cousin Dinky and Della. Tom and Lucy wanted to talk about their problem with them. Major Little thought it wasn't a good idea. It was a sad time for the children. They were so sure their parents were somewhere on Smoke Mountain, but now, without any adults to help them, they knew they could never get to the mountain to find out. Finally, it was time to go up on the roof to wait for Cousin Dinky and Della to fly in. Major Little, Tom, Lucy, and the McDusk twins went up to watch them land. The wind was blowing from the east. "That's a good sign," said Major Nick. "They'll be here soon for sure." "There they are now," yelled Lucy. She stood near the chimney and pointed to the eastern sky. Everyone turned to look. A blue and white glider came sailing down towards the big house. As it drew near the roof, 2 parachutes snapped open behind it. They acted like brakes to slow the glider down. At the same time, a fishhook anchor was dropped from the cockpit. The anchor was tied to a long piece of twine. The glider curved down to the roof. It landed perfectly, then bounced along over the rough shingles. The fishhook caught on a shingle and pulled the glider to a sudden stop. Tom and Lucy ran over and grabbed the wingtips. Cousin Dinky jumped out of the cockpit and tied the glider to the roof. He turned to Della, who was still sitting in the aircraft. "Nice landing," he said. Of course, Cousin Dinky was surprised to see Winky and Tip. Major Little told him why they had come to see him. "And so," he said, "I want you to fly them back to Trash City as quickly as you can. Mr. Penny and the mayor must be very worried." "I'm sure they are," said Cousin Dinky. He scratched his head and smiled at Winky and Tip. "I think I know how you feel, kids. When I was your age, I did the same kind of thing," he laughed. "I was always imagining something and then sometimes thinking it really happened." "Me too," said Della, "especially with dreams. I remember when I was really young, sometimes I couldn't tell if I dreamed something or if it really happened." "But it's not like that," Winky protested. "Golly," said Tip, "we know when we're dreaming. We're not babies." Then Cousin Dinky said, "The strangest thing about this is Della and I recently heard a story about tiny people who live up near the top of Smoke Mountain. Hill tinies." Della laughed. "And it's really quite a coincidence," she said. "We were told they fly to places on a bird." "Of course, it's only something we heard about," Cousin Dinky continued. "The tiny people who told us the story had heard it from someone else. I can't remember who." "But they may be our parents," said Winky. "Oh, probably not, Winky," Cousin Dinky said. "We hear lots of strange stories when we're flying around the big valley delivering mail. Anyway, it's hard to believe that there could be tiny people who fly on birds." "It does sound like a neat thing," said Della. "But if it's so easy to do, how come we've never seen it? Dinky and I travel around the big valley all the time." "That's exactly what I think," said Major Little. "It just doesn't make sense. It sounds like a made-up story, a myth, even a fairy tale." "But it's a clue," said Winky. "Couldn't we talk to the people who told you about the bird? Was it a blackbird? Maybe they know something else." "I agree with Winky," said Tom. "So do I," said Lucy. "Listen, you kids," said Cousin Dinky. "I've known quite a few tiny people who tried to train birds. It never worked, really. The few times it looked like it might, the tiny people flew off strapped to their birds and no one ever saw them again." "Maybe it has to be a special kind of bird," said Tom, "that only lives on top of Smoke Mountain." "I think we should investigate," said Lucy, "and find out if it's true that someone saw those tiny people flying on a bird." "Dinky," said Major Little quietly, "I think we should put an end to this kind of talk. These children are going to get their hopes up again, all for nothing." "Well, I'm never going to stop hoping," said Winky. "Neither am I," echoed Tip. "Let's go, McDusk twins. Hop aboard the glider," said Cousin Dinky. "We might as well get this over with." So it still sounds like they aren't going to get any help and they might not be able to make it to Smoke Mountain. I don't know. What do you guys think? Are they ever going to make it back to Smoke Mountain and find their parents? We've only got 1 chapter left. So make sure you click on the assignment in our Google Classroom. You have some reading comprehension questions to answer and a prediction to make. And then on Friday, we will finish this story once and for all. Our very last chapter of our very last Littles book of the year. I'll see you guys on Friday.